I gotta say, there's something satisfying about some of the conversations I've been seeing emerging on YouTube from podcasts like the Dark Horse podcast, where Brett Weinstein recently actually had on a couple of colleagues in the scientific community who were discussing the impact censorship is having on overall dialogue with this whole COVID situation, right? And the reason why it's been nice to see that is because these are voices that are considered to be credible by our culture today. They're voices that come from the scientific community that are now realizing the real issues that exist here with censorship. I mean, I feel like back in 2016, maybe even 2015, when what I would call sort of internet censorship, big tech censorship really started to pick up, a lot of people couldn't fully appreciate how detrimental it was to public discourse. I recently wrote an essay, which I'll flash up on the screen quick, and there'll be a link in the description you can check out if you want. Just kind of outlines my thoughts and feelings as being an alternative independent media for the last 12 years, the impact censorship has had on public discourse. And we're not even talking from a, hey, let's just defend our political side and feel like, this side over here gets censored more than this side, blah, blah. All that aside, there are tons of conversations that really affect every human on this planet that are deeply affected by censorship right now. And there was an article that came out by journalist Lori Clark, and we had just wrote about this on Collective Evolution. You can check out this article as well. But the title is essentially Facebook has removed 16 million pieces of content and added warnings on 167 million. So what you're seeing here is when it comes to COVID-19, right? This is what this article is about, and what Lori Clark put together in what she published as an article in the British Medical Journal, is that when she looked at the data that was trying to get a hold on what was happening with this whole COVID situation and Facebook and big tech in general, how much is actually being censored, and how big of an impact is that having? So initially, right, and this is a very important distinction to make, because I often feel like perhaps some of my colleagues in alternative or independent media don't appreciate this enough. I'm saying that from my perspective. There is actually a lot of bunk out there that comes from independent media and alternative media that is not true, and that is poorly researched or poorly put forth. In some cases, it is actually like nefariously false, which means like some people actually create information that is absolutely false. But there's a great deal of information that gets caught up in a dragnet. So essentially, social media outlets like Facebook, they basically run an algorithm that is seeking what's happening in the comments, what's happening in a newsfeed that relates to COVID. And there's AI that looks at all these posts and that will automatically censor, automatically remove, or automatically apply warnings to this content, so that it can try to limit the amount of misinformation that's going out on Facebook. The challenge is that there's a lot of really good, meaningful, and accurate content that is getting caught up in this dragnet, that's getting caught up in what's happening with this AI. And this is a massive problem. And in looking at, just thinking about over the past year and a half, like 200 million pieces of content on Facebook that have been perhaps, we don't know how many of them are absolutely false versus how many of them are true, but there's 200 million pieces of content. And Lori Clark sort of recognizes in her piece, she says, while a portion of that content is likely to be willfully wrong-headed or vindictively misleading, the pandemic is littered with examples of scientific opinion that have been caught up in this dragnet. And she goes on to say, this underscores the difficulty of defining scientific truth, prompting the bigger question of whether social media platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube should be tasked with this at all. And Lori includes an important quote from Sander van der Litten, who's a professor of social psychology and in society at Cambridge University, who says, I think it's quite dangerous for scientific content to be labeled as misinformation just because of the way people might perceive that. Even though it might fit under a definition of misinformation in a very large technical sense, I'm not sure if that's the right way to describe it more generally, because it could lead to greater politicization of science, which is undesirable. And this is where I want to really focus this piece, and why I feel that sometimes big tech and what's going on with censorship is actually culturally tearing apart our society in a lot of ways. And we can argue all day long whether or not this is an agenda by some form of the ruling elite, or whether this is all happening due to bad thinking, maybe bad thinking that's coming as a result of just being in fear all the time, or having an authoritarian culture that's sort of been ruling our society for quite a while. We can argue as to what the actual source of all this stuff is, but the general point here is that the way we're perceiving misinformation is just dramatically confusing right now in society. And I point a lot of this to these censorship, or to these fact checkers. I point a lot of this to big tech and mainstream media in general, not to blame them, but to see what their role is in this particular story as it's emerging. Because what we're seeing happening is, like, imagine this, right? You are a member of a community, right? And you decide, hey, I'm not going to get a vaccine. Because you've been looking at the information, you've been understanding what's going on, you've been understanding that a lot of very well-respected doctors and scientists are saying, hey, we need to slow down on this vaccine. It's maybe not as safe as we like, and you might be around 35 years old or 40 and healthy. You have a very low risk of dying of COVID-19, and you actually probably have a greater risk of being injured by this vaccine when you're looking at the data that's emerging. And so you decide, hey, I'm not going to get this vaccination. And you're now at a community gathering of some kind, and a bunch of people are now attacking you for not getting a vaccination because they think that you're irresponsible to the community. Perhaps these people have only been watching mainstream media and have built their perspectives based on that. Now you have this divide, right? You have this clash that's going to happen in society, where these are the real effects. This is what happens on a day-to-day level. This is how people are affected on a day-to-day level by this censorship, by the big tech organizations basically just throwing out the baby with the bathwater, and mainstream media kind of just towing the line of whatever government says, or whatever some ruling class agenda might be. Whatever it is, the point is this is how people are affected every day. They're shamed. I've had so many friends reach out to me over the course of this pandemic saying, look, I'm withholding on getting the vaccine, and my friends are shaming me all day long. They don't want to come over. They don't want to hang out with me. They don't want to do other stuff because they've been led to believe that I'm a bad person for doing this, as opposed to honest and transparent discourse with people, where you don't censor the science, where you don't censor the scientists, and where you allow culture to understand this is not an open and shut case, right? When it comes to these vaccines, there's a lot still that we need to explore. And so my challenge with a lot of this stuff is we're seeing that if we don't start having a more honest and open conversation that's transparent, we are actually going to rip apart the fabric of society, where people who are deciding to, and this is offensive to some people because they believe that, and this is why I don't put anything against people that just watch mainstream media. They're doing what they believe to be right? Like they think they're informing themselves fully. But those who are choosing to get a more wider variety of information, really just start checking sources and really diving deeper on a lot of other credible opinions out there, are unfortunately getting beat down for doing this. And this is a huge, huge, huge issue that is going to only get bigger as time goes on. And if we don't start to realize basic things like what says in this next quote here from this article that Lori Clark is talking about, which says, science is being suppressed for political and financial gain. COVID-19 has unleashed state corruption on a grand scale, and it is harmful to public health. Politicians and industry are responsible for this opportunistic embezzlement. So too are scientists and health experts. The pandemic has revealed how the medical political complex can be manipulated in an emergency, a time when it is even more important to safeguard science. And this comes from Cameron Abbas, who's a doctor, executive editor of the British Medical Journal, and the editor of the Bulletin of the World Health Organization, right? So what this person is saying is equivalent to what the citizens out there are saying, who are being called conspiracy theorists, who are being called anti-vaxxers, right? This has a massive impact on how society operates, right? We think that this is stuck to, the corporations are making bad decisions, and it's, maybe it's just going to affect their bottom line, and that's why they're making these decisions, or government's just trying to do their best, or everyone's just trying to do their best. Yeah, but if we don't responsibly listen to the pleas of what people are saying out there, we are not going to make the situation any better. If we continue to say things like, let's not focus on the negative, let's focus on the positive stuff, right? We are going to continually move forward in a world that more and more and more and more and more becomes confining, where bad thinking operates like this, where culture of authoritarian rule operates like this, where censorship increases. There's only so much inner work and personal work and meditation that can be done to actually change the way somebody is before we actually have to start taking action in society. right? So why I bring that up is because here at Collective Evolution and you know what we're going to be doing in our new venture that's coming out very shortly, we're always linking what is the underpinning to why society, what is the underpinning reason to why society is operating the way it is. And in a lot of cases, we're trying to separate, you know, the personal transformation, our state of being, our state of mind, our state of body, right? We're trying to separate that from what is happening in society. Like this is positive to focus on and this is negative to focus on. When the reality of the situation is these have to be merged, moving together in one conversation, saying, look, this society that we're living in is causing a stressed out body, which creates a stressed out mind. The executive functioning falls apart. We no longer can communicate with one another, right? This is partly what's going on. At the same time, you know, the stressed out body, the stressed out mind that could have come from perhaps previous childhood experiences or just stress at work, whatever it might be, is causing the breakdown, which then from that breakdown, we look at our society and we say, well, yeah, I'm just going to trust whatever the authority figure tells us because I don't know how to do anything else. I'm struggling. There's a lot going on in my life. I don't know how to move through it. I don't know how to find center. I don't know how to find a calm mind, a calm body, a regulated nervous system. And because I don't know how to find that, I can't make decisions on society. So this is a simultaneous journey that has to happen here. And we're not going to get anywhere if we continually avoid these conversations, if we don't bring up the reality of what's going on and bring it up in a manner that allows us to actually communicate, meaning we can't say, oh, look at all this, fucked up crazy shit that's going on over here, la da da da. Let's talk about it. Look, everything I just laid out here, I feel like we could speak to anybody about this, right? We could have a communication with almost everybody and they're gonna listen, and they may not agree, but we should be able to continue to have this dialogue and have this conversation and not start name calling each other. And that's a huge part to this entire story here. But I got to bring it back to the part that is inspiring about this again, is that, I think this is pushing us to look within a little bit more. It's pushing us to look at what action might need to be taken, but it's also, looking at and appreciating the fact that more and more, credible individuals in our society are speaking up about this. But that goes back to what I said at the beginning of this video here, just looking at what's been happening with the Dark Horse podcast and these academics and scientists and stuff like that have been talking about this stuff. It lends a lot more. It opens up the audience a lot more. So it's not just us crazy independent media people who've been saying this for decades that are talking about this stuff. Thanks so much for watching this video. As you can probably imagine, censorship and demonetization has made things incredibly difficult for independent media to survive. We basically rely solely on you to make sure we keep doing what we're doing. If you want to support our work and support this important mission as well, consider becoming a CE member. Basically, you get access to a whole bunch of different member benefits that we have. You can check out the link in the description to become a CE member and learn more about the benefits and, of course, support this work. Thanks so much, and we'll catch you next time.